You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Hello, happy people. You know what time it is. It's Storytime with Chris. As we are back here on my favorite day of the week. And I'm just gonna keep reiterating this point because every Wednesday, ever since I can remember, something good always happens to me on a Wednesday. And it helps with the fact that I was born on a Wednesday. Kind of reminds me of like Solomon Grundy. Anybody who's a Batman fan knows who that character is. Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday. Like, we'll have to do a whole like October themed reading when it comes to like characters like that, because that character is based off of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which we're not going to read for story time for my younger kids. That's for the older kids. Kids, when you grow up and get to be 13, 14, 15, then you can read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But until then, we have other stories that we can read. So I was thinking about it earlier today, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Mental health is incredibly important. If you feel stressed, if you feel sad, if you feel like you're not being heard, it's okay to voice your opinion. It's okay to vent. It's okay to have someone within your support system speak positivity into your life. Because if that is not being fulfilled, you don't need to put your energy into that. You don't have to entertain those people who take away from you and don't give back to you. Actually, I'll give you an example that I dealt with when I was in elementary school. It's like being kicked down into the sandbox and you skid your knees and all these kids pass you by and don't help you up. But if at least one, maybe two people who happen to be nearby help you get back up, that's what counts. Hang out with those type of people who don't need an award, who don't need the recognition. And I apologize for the noise in the background because apparently they're mowing outside. That just happens. I thought that typically only happens on Tuesdays, but apparently they moved it to Wednesday, which would then mean that the person who was doing it did not do it yesterday. It's just a thing. But I say all that to say, because I feel as though there are people who don't get to see people who look like me talk about mental health. Like I myself see a therapist once a week. And it's incredibly helpful. It has allowed me to grow as a person. And sometimes when we have these mental gymnastics of battling within ourselves the issues or the flaws that we would like to reevaluate, it kind of puts us on our own hero's journey. And I say that because it's going to be anticipating for the next book in the Prydain Chronicles, which is Taran the Wanderer, which honestly is my favorite out of the 5 books. Because it's an adventure solely about Taran and him finding out what it means to be a hero. Because a hero is not measured by his great feats or their great accomplishments. They're measured by the strength of their heart and the love that they have for people and putting other people's needs before their own. And when we have people who have bad days or days that just don't pan out, sometimes we fall on that hero's journey. But you fall down 7 times, you get back up 8, because it's the getting back up that counts. At least that's what I believe. Everybody's entitled to do what they will to make their world go round. It's a good thing. I got my tea here, as usual. And no, I don't own the music that you are listening to in the background, which is brought to you yet again by Mr. Ambiance. Please show them some love on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. They have great ambient music for both anime, films, TV, anything you can think of. They have lots and lots of ambient musical selections that I typically use on this channel in order to bring us some atmosphere to our storytelling. My tea is really hot, so I can't really like gulp it. I can't do that because then that's how you burn your lips, and that's not fun. I was almost about to say nobody wants burnt toes, but that doesn't make sense about burnt lips. Nobody wants burnt lips. It happens. Now, we are back, and apparently the great sorceress Akren is making her way to the Isle of Mona, and Prince Gwydion is still in disguise as the shoemaker. He's been telling Taran, he's like, hey, if you want to help me out, just be silent. Don't say anything about it. Let me figure out a proper plan before we tell everybody, hey, like an evil sorceress that's thousands of years old is about to come to the island and hurt people. Specifically the Princess Eilonwy, who is still obliviously unaware of what's going on, or at least that's what we saw last chapter, because Taran just entered the Great Hall, and Princess Eilonwy and the Chief Steward, Mag, are not in the room. So, we're gonna find out what happens next. Lots of shadiness going on. Lots of... What's another way of... We don't need no... That's grammatically incorrect, but I can't figure it out, y'all. I was trying to say it and I've lost it so fast. There's some shadiness going on. I'll just say that. There's some shadiness going on in this story. I'm gonna find out what happens next. Chapter 5. The Oath. Where is Eilonwy? Taran cried as King Rudlam and Queen Llyr stared at him in astonishment. Where is Mag? He's made off with her. Sire, I beg you, turn out your guard. Help me find them. Eilonwy is in danger of her life. What? Queen Llyr clucked. Mag, the princess, you're overwrought, young man. Perhaps the sea air, don't shake so and wave your arms about, has gone to your head. Because someone isn't here for breakfast doesn't mean they're in danger, does it, my dear? She asked, turning to the king. I should hardly think so, my dear, answered King Rudlam. There's a heavy charge to bring against our loyal retainer, he added, looking gravely at Taran. Why do you accuse him? For a moment Taran stood perplexed and torn. Gwydion had bound him to secrecy, but now that Mag had struck, must the secret still be kept? Taking his decision, he let the words tumble from his lips, hurriedly and often confusingly telling all that had happened since the companions had reached Dinas Ritnat. Queen Llyr shook her head. This shoemaker disguised as Prince Gwydion, or was it the other way around? And ships and torch signals to enchantresses make the wildest tale I've heard, young man. Wild indeed, said King Rudlam, but we shall learn the truth easily enough. Fetch the shoemaker, we shall see if he is the Prince of Dawn. Prince Gwydion seeks Akren, Taran cried. I have given you the truth. If it is not so, you shall take my life for it. Will you prove my words? Fetch your chief steward. King Rudlam frowned. It is odd that Mag should not be here, he admitted. Very well, Taran of Caer Dallben, he shall be found, and you shall repeat your tale in his presence. He clapped his hands and ordered a servitor to summon the chief steward. Frantic with anxiety, knowing that time was fleeting and delay could cost Eilonwy's life, Taran was nearly beside himself when the servitor at last returned with tidings that Mag appeared to be nowhere in the castle, nor could Eilonwy be found. As King Rudlam hesitated, still puzzled by Taran's words, Gurgi, Caw, and Fflewddur entered the great hall. Taran raced to them. Mag, that villainous spider! The bard exclaimed as soon as Taran told him what had happened. Great Beelord, she's ridden off with him. I saw them galloping through the gate. I called to her, but she didn't hear me. She seemed cheerful enough. I'd no idea anything was amiss, but they're gone, long gone by now. Queen Llyr turned pale. The ladies of the court gasped fearfully. King Rudlam sprang to his feet. You have spoken the truth, Taran of Caer Dallben. Shouting for the guard, the king strode from the great hall. The companions hastened after him. At King Rudlam's orders, the stables were flung open. Within moments, the courtyard filled with warriors and neighing horses. Prince Rune, meanwhile, had strolled into the courtyard where he appeared at the gathering host. Hello, hello. He's always saying that. Like, that's... I'm gonna be on my soapbox for a bit. Prince Rune reminds me of a person I used to know in high school that was a brown-noser. Brown-noser is a colloquial term to refer to somebody who basically gets in your good graces to be in your business. basically, in layman's terms, somebody who's very exceptionally nosy and will do any and everything to please you so they can further be in your business. It's not a fun time. And it gets so frustrating. Ugh. But he's gonna get his comeuppance. Just watch. Just watch. Hello, hello, he called to Taran. Is this a hunting party? Splendid thought. I should enjoy a brisk morning ride. A hunt for your traitor steward, Taran retorted, thrusting Rune aside and making his way to King Rutlam. Sire, where's your war leader? Give us leave to put ourselves at his service. My war leader, sorry to say, is none other than Mag himself, the king answered. As we've never had a war on Mona, we've never needed a war leader, and it seemed quite in order to give Mag the honorary title. I shall form up the search party myself. As for you, yes, by all means, help with any tasks that need doing. When King Rutlam saw to the ordering of the warriors, Taran and the companions labored with all speed, tightening saddle girths and handing out weapons from the armory. Prince Rune, Taran saw, had clambered aside a sway-backed, piebald mare that persisted in turning in circles despite the efforts of the prince to control her. Fluter and Gurgi had led out 3 horses. A glance at the animals filled Taran with despair, for they seemed unspirited, of no great mettle, and he wished for the swift-footed Melilas, now grazing peacefully at Caer Dallben. King Rutlam, taking Taran by the arm, drew him hurriedly into an empty stable. You and I must speak together, the king said quickly. The warriors are ready and divided into 2 parties. One I shall lead over the lands south of the river Allaw. You and your companions are to ride with my son, who shall command the search in the hills of Paris. Literally, it's spelled not Paris as in the country, the city of Paris, but P-A-R-Y-S. Paris. North of the Allaw, at his eye of him I would speak. Prince Rune in command? Taran burst out. What then, Taran of Caer Dallben? King Rutlam asked sharply. Do you question Prince Rune's skill? Skill? Taran cried. He has none. Eilonwy's life hangs in the balance. Our task must be done without delay. Give command to a feckless fool? He can barely knot a sandal lace, let alone ride a horse or wield a sword. The voyage to Mona showed me more than enough. Choose one of your liegemen, a warrior, a forester, anyone save Rune. He stopped short. Dallben has my oath to protect Eilonwy, and I shall say what is in my heart. Were I to say less, I would fail my duty. If I am to suffer for my words, then so be it. Once again you speak the truth, King Rutlam answered. It is not you who suffers for it, but I. He put a hand on Taran's shoulder. Think you I do not know my own son? You are right in your judgment, but I know too that Rune must grow to be both a man and a king. You carry the burden of oath to Dallben. I pray to you take the burden of another one. Word of your deeds has reached Mona, King Rutlam went on, and I have seen for myself that you are a brave lad and honorable. I confide this knowledge to you. My master of horse is a skillful tracker. He rides with your party, and in search shall direct the search. Prince Rune commands in name only, for the warriors accept leadership from the royal house. I would entrust my son to you and beg you to let no harm befall him. Nor, added the king, smiling sadly, to let him make too great a fool of himself. Much he has to learn, and much perhaps he may learn from you. One day he must be king of Mona, and it is my hope he will rule honorably and wisely with Eilonwy his queen. Eilonwy? Taran cried. With Rune, her husband? Yes, answered King Rutlam. When the princess comes of age, it is our desire they shall wed. Princess Eilonwy, Taran murmured, confused. Does she know of this? Not yet, nor does my son, said King Rutlam. Eilonwy must have time to grow used to Mona and our ways here, but I'm sure it will be happily arranged. After all, she is a princess, and Rune is of royal blood. Taran bowed his head. The grief in his heart kept him from speaking. What say you, Taran of Caer Dallben? King Rutlam asked. Will you give me your word? From the courtyard Taran could hear the clamor of warriors and the voice of Fluter calling his name, yet these sounds reached his ears as though from a great distance. He remained silent, his eyes downcast. In this I do not speak as liege lord to liege man, King Rutlam added. Excuse me, wrong character. In this I do not speak as liege lord to liege man, King Rudlam added. I speak as a father who loves his son. He paused, watching Tarn closely. At last Tarn met the king's eyes. I will swear this oath, he said slowly. Your son will come to no harm if it lies in my power to keep him from it. Tarn put a hand to his sword. I pledge my life to do so. Go with my thanks, Tarn of Caer Dallben, King Rudlam said, and help us bring the Princess Eilonwy safely home. The bard and Gurgi were already mounted when Tarn hurried from the stable. Heavy-hearted, he swung into the saddle. Caw flew to join him. Prince Rune, who had finally managed to keep his steed from turning in circles, was shouting commands, unheeded as usual. As the searching parties galloped out the gates, Tarn lifted Caw from his shoulder. Can you find her? Seek her carefully, my friend, he murmured, while the crow cocked his head and looked at Tarn with shrewd eyes. Tarn flung his arms upward. Caw launched himself into the air and sped aloft. Wings beating, the crow circled overhead, drove higher against the sky, then disappeared from sight. Yes, yes, shouted Gurgi, waving his arms. Go with flyings and spyings. Lead us to evil, wicked steward. The sooner, the better, cried Fflewddur. I can't wait to get my hands on that sneering spider. He shall know the fury of a flam. Glancing behind him, Tarn saw King Rudlam's band stream from the castle and turned southward. Ahead, the master of horse led his party of warriors toward the higher ground above Dines Rhynnaut and signaled for the outriders to search for tracks. Tarn's face was set and grim as he rode silently next to Fflewddur. Have no fear, the bard assured him. We shall bring Eilonwy back with us safe and sound before nightfall, and all of us shall make merry over his adventure. I promise you a new song in celebration. You do well to make it a chant of betrothal, Tarn said bitterly, and sing of the wedding of the Prince of Mona. Rune? Cried the startled Fflewddur. To be wed? I have no idea. That's one disadvantage of being lodged in the stables instead of the castle. You miss the news and gossip. Prince Rune, indeed. Who is he to be his bride? Painfully, Tarn told the bard of King Rudlam's plans and of his own oath to keep Rune from harm. Oh, said Fflewddur when Tarn had finished. So that's the way the wind blows. Strange, he added with a quick glance at Tarn. I had always hoped that if Eilonwy was betrothed to be with anyone... Yes, well, what I mean to say is that despite all the squabbling and bickering between the two of you, I'd rather suspect... Do not mock me, Tarn burst out, reddening. Eilonwy is a princess of the house of Llyr. You know my station as well as I. Such a hope has never been in my mind. It is only fitting for Eilonwy to be betrothed to one of her own rank. Angrily, he drew away from the bard and galloped ahead. So you say, murmured Fflewddur, hurrying after him. Look closer into your heart. You may find your opinion to be somewhat different. Tarn, unhearing, pressed his steed to join the line of warriors. Turning northward, along the lower slopes of the hills of Paris, the searching party broke into smaller bands, each quartering its own ground. The warriors, widely separated, moved in long, wavering lines, often out of each other's sight, painstakingly scouting every possible hiding place. Yet as the morning wore away and noontide passed, they found no trace of the chief steward or Eilonwy. Among the green and gentle slopes ran broken, pebbly trails where the fleeing mag might have passed and where clues would be invisible to the eyes even of the most able tracker. Tarn's heart sank. In his mind chafed the fear that he was following a false hope and that Eilonwy had been taken into an altogether different direction. From time to time he anxiously scanned the sky for a glimpse of Caw returning with news of the princess. Gwydion, Tarn knew, was the only one who might discover Ochren's plan. Mag was the key, but the chief steward had acted so swiftly that perhaps even now he was beyond the reach of the searching party. Tarn redoubled his efforts to find a broken twig, a loose stone, anything that might bring them closer to Eilonwy by nightfall, put an end to the day's searching. Gurgi, riding close at hand, called out to him. Look, look! Noble prince goes far alone, too far into the woods. He will lose himself, then cheerful hellos will turn to sad moanings and groanings. Oh! Taran, who had dismounted to study what it seemed a possible trail, raised his eyes in time to see Prince Rune galloping over the shadow of a hill. He shouted at him, but Rune was too distant to hear, or more likely, Taran thought was simply paying no heed. He leapt astride his horse and sought to overtake the prince. Until now, he had managed to keep Prince Rune always in view, but by the time Taran reached the hill, Rune had vanished into the shadows of an alder grove. Below, in the rapidly darkening meadow, Llyr had cantered into sight and was calling him. Taran shouted Rune's name once again, then beckoned for the bard and Gurgi to join him. "That sickening spider has escaped us today," Llyr cried angrily, while his nag labored to the crest. "But we shall fetch him out tomorrow, and Nylanwe will be safe and sound. If I know the princess, Mag has already begun to regret stealing her away. She's worth a dozen warriors if she's tied hand and foot." Despite the bard's brave words, his face looked deeply worried. "Come," said Llyr. "The master of horse is calling in the warriors. We're to make camp with them for the night." Even as the bard spoke, Taran heard the faint notes of a signal horn. He frowned. "I dare not leave Prince Rune to wander alone in the forest." "In that case," replied Llyr, glancing toward the setting sun, "we had best get a hold of him without delay. A flam is keen-eyed, but I'd rather not go stumbling about the countryside after dark, if it can be possibly avoided."
"Hasten, yes, with hurryings and scurryings," cried Gurgi. "Fearsome shadows fall, and bold but cautious Gurgi does not know what hurtful things hide in them."
The companions rode quickly into the grove, where Taran felt certain they would find the prince. However, once beyond the ring of alders and seeing nothing of him, Taran's alarm grew. Vainly he called the prince's name. Only the echo returned. "He cannot have ridden far," he told the bard. "Even Rune would have wits enough to halt at nightfall." Darkness covered the grove. The horses, more used to the quiet stalls in Dinas Rintnat than to the forest of Mona, trod fearfully, rearing and shying at every wind-stirred bush. The companions were obliged to dismount and make their way on foot, leading the reluctant steeds. But this time Taran was deeply troubled. What had begun as a simple matter had turned grave. "He might have fallen off his horse," Taran said. "Even now he might be lying hurt or unconscious somewhere." "Then I suggest we find our way back to the rest of the band," said Llyr, "and ask them to help us. In this gloom, the more eyes, the better." "We would lose too much time," Taran answered, pressing on through the underbrush. Gurgi followed, whimpering softly to himself. The rising ground told Taran they were moving above the foothills. No sound came but the hiss of saplings that whipped back as he passed, and the click of the horses' hooves over pale stones. Taran stopped short, his heart in his mouth. From a corner of his eye he glimpsed a fleeting movement. It lasted but an instant, a shadow within a shadow. Fighting down his fear, he groped ahead. The horses had turned more skittish than before, and Taran's mount laid back his ears and voiced a frightened whinny. Gurgi, too, had sensed the dark presence. The terrified creature's hair rose along his neck, and he began to howl pitifully.
"Oh, wicked evil things come to follow harmless Gurgi. Oh, kind master, save Gurgi's poor tender head from hurtful dangers."
Taran drew his sword, and the companions, with many backward glances into the darkness, hurried along. This time the horse did not lag, but plunged desperately ahead, nearly dragging the bard with them. "Great Beelern!" protested Llyr, who had crashed into a tree and struggled to free his jangling harp from a bush. "Hold up there! Next thing you know, we'll be looking for our own steeds as well as for Prince Rune." With difficulty, Taran managed to calm the horses, who now refused to budge. Despite all his coaxing and pleading and tugging, the horses stood, stiff-legged and round-eyed, their flanks trembling. Taran, himself exhausted, sank to the ground. "Our search is blind and useless," he said. "You were right," he went on, turning to Llyr. "We should have gone back. The time I had hoped to save is wasted twice over, and Nylanwe's danger is greater with every moment we delay. Now Prince Rune is lost, and so is Caw, for all we know." "I'm sure you're right," sighed Llyr, "and unless you or Gurgi knows where we are, I'd rather suspect we're lost too." And that is where we will end for this afternoon. They could have used the Hansel and Gretel method. They could have had a loaf of bread and broke it apart on the ground as they were walking as a trail to get home. But obviously we know what happens with that story. They could have left a trail. They could have left a trail, maybe some shiny rocks in a line, maybe some flour, maybe some oil. They had lamp oil back then. They could have left rats. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. There could have been a means to keep a trail to where they wouldn't have gotten lost. But it happens to the best of us. I myself am clumsy. I've gotten lost plenty of times. But I at least know where my cardinal directions are. So like, for example, kids, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. So if you know those two things, you can figure out which is north and which is south. I can't remember the turn of phrase about where north and south is, but it'll come to me later. But as always, I love you all so very much, my lovelies. I'll see you later and have a wonderful day today.